Monday, January 27th, and this is the Moscow City Council Administrative Committee. And my name is Tom Lamar on the Moscow City Council, and with me are Wayne Krause and John Weber, also on the Moscow City Council. And with us today is Acting City Supervisor Bill Belknap. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from January 13th.
Mr.
John.
Chairman, I move that we approve those minutes.
Second.
Second? Okay, so we will consider those minutes approved. The second item on the agenda is the Child Passenger Safety Seat Grant with Elisa Anderson. Welcome, Elisa.
Good afternoon. David Duke is out of town, so I'm...
Is that mic picking you up? I don't hear. Can you all hear
Hello?
Elisa?
Hi.
That one's
There you
working.
go.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon. David Duke is out of town today, so I'm here to present this for him, and we're doing it with him if he was here. This is a child safety seat program is something that we participated in, I think, since 2003. And each year we apply for approximately $9,000. This year it looks like we'll be applying for that same amount. It allows us to purchase approximately 143 to 150 car seats, and also gives us the opportunity to retrain or train new technicians who can install and teach parents how to
They can't hear you back there, so speak up a little bit. Good.
how to properly install child car seats. Is it working? So again, we're applying for the same round of funding through the Idaho Department of Transportation and also the chapter of American Pediatrics, Academy of Pediatrics for Idaho. This program is usually managed by Marie Miller in the police department, and she's a great activist and advocate for this program, and she assists in putting on the training and coordinating with the partners that also participate in the program, and she works the process through from beginning to end. So we're looking for your recommendation to move this forward to council to go ahead and apply for this grant again this year.
Well, totally in favor of this thing and support it all the way. Just informational question only, and that is, do the people that get these child seats, is there a process that they have to go through, or do they just essentially show up at the police station and say, I've got a need for one?
You know, what they like to do is they hold a training or a session, and they like parents to come there so that they can train them and show them how to do it. But I know there have been a few times where a parent went to Marie and said, I don't have a child safety seat, would you be able to provide me with one? And she kind of does an individual session. But they prefer to do it in that group setting because there's usually 5 to 8 people that know how to install them, and they can go over the instructions with them as a class and then do some individual installation instructions. But it's pretty much open to whoever needs a car seat.
Okay. I'm fully in favor.
Yeah, I've actually seen them doing this. They put it on out at Toyota at one time. Toyota Pullman is one of the sponsors of this, as you saw from the material. And they've got their installers that are trained. They teach the parents how to install them properly, and it's been a really good program. So, yeah, we absolutely want to just keep going with it and move forward. You bet.
And
Okay.
I agree. I think it's terrific. Let's approve that or move it forward to a council approval on the consent agenda. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Next item on the agenda is the Latah County request for project approval and grant application support for Phillips Farm Park with Andy Grant and Dwight Curtis. I think Dwight's kicking this off and handing it over to Andy. Is that correct? And Kathy's also here. Okay, Kathy Dawes is joining Andy.
Not sure that microphone's working, Andy, so you guys
Can you tap it? Yeah,
Yep,
that's
it's working now.
Okay. So please, well, Dwight will start off by saying his name, but then when you're ready, please state your name and your role and so forth when you get there.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. What we have here is Latah County, who manages Phillips Farm Park for the city, is requesting authorization from the city to have a couple construction projects, as well as they are applying for a grant that would fund these projects. Two different items here. With that, there's understanding that the grants that the city is also applying for these same funds, and there was some concern amongst some of the council members of competition for funding, and so we just wanted to go through those two items. One of is the projects, and the other one is a possible letter of support. And I'll turn this over to, I guess, Kathy to start with. And
let me set the stage by saying that the city of Moscow is the owner of this piece of property, which is how many acres?
160.
160. And does anybody know what year the city received that property gift?
She's going to do a little presentation.
So she's going to say it.
Do a little
at that
bit of
time.
background.
Okay. I just wanted to put it into
new,
context about why the county and why the city. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
And my name is Kathy Dawes. I'm a resident of Moscow. I live at 1018 East E Street. I'm secretary of the Latah County Parks and Rec Board. Okay, so a little bit about the Phillips Farm. I believe all the city council members received this packet that had a page of the history of the park. The property was bequeathed to the city of Moscow by Virgil Phillips when he died in 1972. And from that time, the city has given its management to other entities throughout the history of the park. I'm not going to go through all the history unless you would like me to do that. No? Okay. All right. So the Phillips Farm Park, I just have a picture here of one of the events we've had out there. This was last October for the Fall Festival, and somehow this is not working.
let's see if that works this time.
That one? Oh dear. Nope. I'll let you try. Which one were you pushing?
You're good. Just
That
the same
one? Okay. All right. A new entrance sign to be installed soon acknowledges the city on the right, lower right there, the city logo as the owners, and the county on the left as the managers. This sign was purchased by funds from the county and will be installed soon. Virgil Phillips left the property to Moscow to be used for the benefit and use of the children of Moscow for recreational purposes. A bird's eye view of the 160 acres, it's basically outlined as a square. They're a large square, just with the Highway 95 cutting off the upper northwest corner of it. And the entrance is where the B is. And as you can see below the B, there's a white rectangular area there. That is a parking area currently. As you go down the road, there's another parking area below that and several shelters and structures. The park has 5 miles of maintained trails throughout it. Am I too close now? Okay. I'll try to get this right. Throughout the park are trail signs and kiosks that have been built by volunteers. The most recent one by the Palouse Prairie School children, who did a study of scat all over the property and did a wonderful job of showing what is found there. There are at least 4 kiosks throughout the area telling visitors where trails are, what things to look for, etc. Moscow High School uses the park often for cross-country events. They do work parties out there, especially during the summertime. They've put in over 600 hours of effort to keep and maintain the park area. They have put in a new orchard. Virgil loved apples and loved to find new heirloom varieties of apples, and so they are keeping up with that tradition. They also have bird boxes and have been monitoring both birds and amphibians for many years. We have an annual fall festival for the last 11 years. Actually, no, it's been since 2001, so it's been more than that we invite the public to come and see what this wonderful resource has to offer. And Tim Story and his wife offer their free services with their apple presses, and we make lots of cider. The kids make it themselves. We have wagon rides, music from local musicians. The Potlatch Junior Jammers are shown there. And the rides have gotten to be even more spectacular with the horses there. Nature activities, Raptor Club from WSU, pond activities, nature crafts, and so on, and food provided by groups such as the Future Problem Solvers of Moscow High School as a fundraiser. They have used this often as one of their major fundraisers. There are many scout projects throughout the park, bridges, kiosks, and a display of farm implements that were on the property are just a couple of those projects. One thing that is really needed at the park is a more accessible park entrance and parking area. This has actually been a priority goal since 2000, really, when the county developed its overall plan for the park, for a long-term goal. And so we're trying to realize that goal with this particular grant proposal. That's a view from the parking lot, and as you can see, there's a nice fence there. It is a brand-new fence. It was an Eagle Scout project, just completed this past year, and it outlines the parking area that we wish to pave. So here's a picture of why we think it needs paving. It's pretty bad to use when in the wet months, and takes a lot of work to maintain it, to have people go there. When it's used, when the park is used by large groups, and that happens often with the cross-country meets that are there and with the open house, this parking area is filled. And so there have been weddings out there, lots of different events. So it would be wonderful if we could have that paved. The current park facilities are 2 picnic shelters that were completed in 2003 with grant money from the Forest Service, $25,000 grant. And the latest addition is the new tractor shed that actually also houses equipment and supplies for educational activities, and hopefully would be used somehow in the future for some educational activities. And that was basically paid for with $13,000 from the Friends of Phillips Farm. And we have a porta potty, which is not ADA compliant. It's totally inadequate for large groups, and is basically not good for the crowds that we have there. The people who use the park, the kids who come, their families who come, sometimes limit their visits because they don't want to stay long enough to have to go to the bathroom. We even have a letter of support from the Palouse Prairie School, who uses the property extensively, and the teacher there said the children don't like to drink water because they're afraid they're going to have to use the porta potty. So we need a permanent vault toilet. This is a copy of basically a picture of one that's currently at Moose Creek, and that's the type of facility we're looking for. The location of the toilet would be down in the area where the 2, you can see those, not hexagonal, but they're, I don't know how many sides they have, the shelters. The lower shelter down at the bottom of the hill is to the left and up from the X. And so as you can drive down the road into that area, we don't like to encourage traffic down there, but it certainly is available for people who need to drive down, and that would be have access to that toilet that would be handicapped accessible, wheelchair accessible. The tractor shed is the building down in the lower left corner there. These are the user groups that use the Phillips Farm currently. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. We have letters of support from just about every one of these groups that have told us that they really would appreciate a permanent toilet there, and a place to park. The high school, when they have the athletic events there, have many, many buses, and the buses really don't like to use the parking, and the way the whole situation is there is just really not adequate. So I have in your packet, I only gave you 5 letters of support, but we now have 15. So we have lots of support for this project. We are requesting support from the Moscow City Council because of several reasons. Number one, these projects at the farm will benefit all users of the park, most of whom are Moscow citizens. Increasing numbers of Moscow youth and families will be using the park due to future city and county collaboration on programs. The Latah County Parks Board recently met with Eric Newell of the City Parks and Rec program, and we're so excited about the possibility of collaborating with the city on providing programs out there at the park, not only in the summer but throughout the year. Currently, the City of Moscow Parks and Rec put on a fall Harvest Festival. Currently, the Latah County puts on the Fall Festival at the park. Both of them occur in October. We'd like to put them together. We'd like to collaborate and bring everybody out there, and Eric's very much in favor of that. We would also like to propose that by this August, we would possibly have a Pioneer Day Camp for a week for kids out at the park in collaboration with the City Parks and Rec. The proposed projects will also help the City of Moscow fulfill its obligation to honor Virgil Phillips' wishes for the use of the property. It's for kids. It's for kids and families of Moscow. And although we are requesting money for these projects from the same Idaho Department of Parks and Rec Recreational Trails Program Fund as the city is, our request, $38,400, represents only 2/100ths of the total of the state's recreational trail program funds that are available this year. How much of the pie are we requesting? Here's the whole pie. Approximately $2 million in the RTP fund is available. Right now, the city is requesting $2,808,893 of these RTP funds, while we are requesting only $38,400. So we're asking for a very, very small piece of the pie. Another way to look at it, if you'd rather not use a pie, is a bar graph, which again shows the difference in the amount of funds that are being requested from Latah County, actually, because not only is the city requesting for the Lola Clyde Park, we are requesting for the Phillips Farm, but the Latah Trail is also making a request as well. Ours is definitely the smallest request. And according to Tammy Johnson, the North Region Grant Specialist for the Idaho Department of Parks and Rec, grants are awarded on their individual merit, and competing grants regionally do not play a factor. If it's a good grant proposal, it should score well. So no matter which proposal or proposals are funded, Moscow's youth and their families will benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, did you have anything more to
Yeah,
add?
Andy Grant, Director of Latah County Parks, and it looks like Kathy covered most everything and really didn't leave a lot for me, which I'm fine with. Seems like she did a great job. But basically, if the concern is competition, the city request and this request for $38,400 is really not in the same league even. That if for some reason this proposal scored higher than the city's, it really wouldn't be the one that's bumping the city. And I can't tell you how they're going to score. So,
Wayne.
Actually, Andy, the way I'd be concerned more about it would be if one was going to get bumped, is if the city applying would bump you guys.
Well,
If our applying makes it less, but apparently from what you're saying, it really doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, and, with that logic, that's saying, well, don't even try because you might get hurt. Well, we want to at least try, it's
We're not going to get the money unless we ask for it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Well,
We just
my
want-
thoughts on that was maybe the city wouldn't apply to enhance your chances of getting it.
Oh, I wouldn't worry about that.
No. We're not asking you to do that.
I
I'm
mean,
not saying we would, I'm just kind of flipping it around,
No.
Okay.
it's, when I talk to them up there, she wants as many applications in as possible, so that increases the chances of more projects in her, the North Region, because she, wants North Region to do well, and she'd be happy if, everyone here, we got most of the money, and we can't do that if we don't apply.
So what you're basically saying is then each grant proposal stands on its own merits.
That's right.
Okay.
John, did you have any?
No, I actually have been out there a couple of times, and it's really a neat place, and I think that if both of these things could happen, that would be very excellent.
And win, yeah.
Win all the way around.
Right.
If either one of them happens, it's still a win. So I'm fully in favor.
Both A and B, yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to move it forward. I had concerns before I saw this presentation last week at the Moscow Parks and Rec Commission meeting, and they voted to support the work out there, and I continue to think that it's a good idea and would love to see it move forward. I think it would be great for the citizens of Moscow to have that parking lot put in, that restroom installed. I'd like to see it happen, and I think it would honor, as you say, Virgil Phillips' gift to Moscow.
And the park essentially gets used by anyone that wants to use it. So
Right.
Absolutely.
it's a county park, region park, area park, in addition to being a park that happens to be owned by Moscow and run by the county. So,
Right.
yeah.
But I would say most of the people who use it are Moscow
Yeah.
residents, so.
Yeah, it's in a great location because it's close enough. It's only 5 miles north of Moscow, but it's far enough out there that, you feel like you're getting out of town. And, this year we haven't had a lot of snow, but other years we get a lot of cross-country skiing use, and we haven't been able to accommodate a lot because without a paved parking lot, it's pretty much impossible to, plow out a parking spot for them. And that was, one of the big concerns with this, how to provide, somewhere close, because we don't want people driving very far in the winter. Just keep them local.
Well, I'd like to see us support it and write a letter of support if we can. I don't know how the timing works on that.
Well, that was one thing I was going to ask, and I haven't talked to Andy about this yet, but the council doesn't meet till February 3rd, which is technically after the deadline for the grant. But if we could supply them with a letter from this committee that says you're forwarding a recommendation to the city council for that date, and that, you all support it, maybe that's what we can add to our grant proposal, because we have to submit a letter of support somehow.
Bill, I think what we can do is, with Art's sitting in the audience already, you have 3 of us here. I think you can send out an email. We can do this through email with the other council members and probably get solidarity on it, I would think, in a rather short order.
That was my recommendations is staff could draft up a letter, or we could circulate it around electronically and get the council's general
I think
approval to
that's
send
the way
it.
to go.
And that would be,
That
way
would
we
be
have the full
wonderful.
council
Yeah.
speaking
And
on
then we
that,
can,
right?
and then we can do a thing on the consent agenda to formalize what we say.
Right.
That'd be great.
That would be wonderful.
That'd be great.
And if they have any questions about it, please, let,
We'll get something.
you
going.
have the presentation there. I'll just leave it there.
And we know the due date for the grant,
Yeah.
obviously. So
It needs to be down in Boise on Friday.
okay, sounds great.
And,
So probably then, well, this won't go on a council agenda because it's already an action item, but staff could give us get an update as to what actually has happened since between today and the next council meeting.
Sure, we can take a look at what any other follow-up action that may be necessary for the council
Right.
to take, but if, due to the timeliness and the time constraints, if we can draft a letter with the support of this committee circulated among the council as a whole, then at least we can get a letter to Andy by Friday.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah,
Great.
this fund is funded by gas tax money. So, every time I filled up my tank today, and more of that money going out. We want to, all work together and try to get as much money of that back as we
That's
can.
good. Well, thanks,
You know.
Andy, for filling up your tank.
Yeah.
I got to do that soon myself.
Tried to put it off, but when
Go
it
ahead,
starts
fill it up
blinking-
tomorrow, too.
Well, I will.
Keep driving. Fund the parks. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is, let's see, what's it called? The 2014 Moscow Farmers Market Policy Change Recommendations with Kathleen Burns kicking it off, and Aaron's going to take over from your place.
Yep. So I wanted to thank several commission members are here. Aaron Carroll is our chair of the Moscow Farmers Market Commission. David Pierce is in the audience, and so is Joanne Manita. And these people have been meeting since May. May was the formation of your Farmers Market Commission. So to go back to our document, I'd like to hit the high notes on the changes in the policy. And you had the legal draft. And just to start out with some of the highlights, under the resale produce vendors area, that was changed. And the change was reduced to blueberries and asparagus. In the previous policies, we had 2 defined resale vendors, and this new policy is anyone can be a carrier for those 2 items. So that's on page 2, C, under resale produce vendors. And then the next one I'd like to bring your attention to is on page 4 of 8. We added a new policy for university colleges and other educational institutions. We've had different groups that have wanted to participate in the market. We had great success this year with soil stewards participating from the University of Idaho. But there are other entities with the universities that are more of a retail, like Vandal Meats, Cooler Gold Cheese. So this is pretty specific to student organizations to be in the market. The next change was 5 on page 5, and that's under number 8. We've had a hard time getting vendor sales reports for the year end for the farmers market report that I do. So we're still missing sales reports from the 2013 season from several vendors. So this was consulting with Gary and legal to change this to have it be a mandatory, where you have to comply, or if there could be disqualification if you do not submit your sales receipts. So we had to put that in there because we've had a poor compliance. Another one that we added that is pretty important is page 7. A lot of vendors have talked about doing site visits to different farms, and we've been doing that with produce, but in consult with Gary and legal, we just put it for all businesses, anybody that's doing business within the market. So that could be a craft vendor, it could be a food vendor, or produce, or nursery, or flowers. But we didn't want to restrict it just to produce vendors. So we added that, site visit. And then the only other, we kind of simplified the children's area. We kind of were overdoing the children's in 2012, and we kind of diminished a lot of that and narrowed it a little bit. And kids don't have to use the Manage My Market system. So with that,
Kids could probably teach the rest of us how to
yes,
use them.
this is correct. We could hire a kid. So with that, the only other recommendation came in today with some staff saying that we should delete the dates in the document and just go to third Thursday of March. So it's a little easier every year than putting a specific date to a time. So we might look at
Because if
that.
that date lands on a Sunday, then it's going to
Right.
mess things up.
Right, so it might be easier on us. So with some of your emails today on the 100 versus 200 versus the vendors that are outside of the 100, there are 4 specific vendors that are outside of the 100-mile radius. And
Can you be clear with us? Because we did get a few emails that made it sound like we're now just starting to do 100 miles, but can you let us know?
We put 100 in there in 11-12, and
2011, 2012. So it's been like
Right.
that for a while now.
Right.
Okay.
So I just want to remind you that these policies were drafted by Randy Fife in 2012 as an initial document that went to City Council. We did make some changes to the document, but you remember in 13, we were asked, do you want to make changes? And we said no. So this is really the first time that we've gone back into the document and really looked at it. So,
And the change with respect to the 100 this year
Yes.
is that we would be granting authority to the person in your seat to make a judgment call if there's a
right.
if there's a exception and there's a specific sentence to that.
Right. And there's also, if those vendors that are specific out of the 100 right now, which would be Tonamakers, Akeley Berry, the Boothmans, and Mr. Durfee, that if they fail to participate in a market season, like if they're not going to be in the market season for 14, they wouldn't automatically be in the market for 15.
They
For right now.
But
could,
they are for right now.
But they are for right now.
Yep.
and if they decided in 15 that they wanted to come back, then they would contact you or the person in your position,
And the commission.
and the call would then be made. So not necessarily gone,
Right.
just have to sit down and maybe plead your case.
Right.
Okay.
So with that, I'd like to just take you to 2 maps, just
Yep,
so you
thanks.
understand. So there's been discussion in your emails today about 100 versus...
I don't think that mic's on. We're,
There's been discussion...
Oh, it is on.
Well,
is
I'll
now.
just-
You can come to the table.
So there was some discussion today in your emails and a lot of responses from the public. And I asked engineering to do a 100-mile circle and a 200-mile circle. So I just wanted you to have that visual with the city of Moscow in the middle. Yeah.
Also on this
Can you-
Ron Hall,
Yeah,
city
thanks.
attorney, the 100 miles, they changed it, used to be 100 road miles, and then they clarified it to 100 air miles.
Yep.
And so that's what that was. And then also getting
that
rid
makes
of
it a lot easier to put on a map for
Yes.
one.
And then also getting rid of the date, getting rid of the 2014 is just so that it is now the farmers market's policy, and they don't have to come back to the council every year until it's changed.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot.
So we did this map here, so we can actually click on who these vendors are. That's your berry guy down in Stanfield, Oregon. And this is Durfee's over in Prosser. They've been in the market for 37 years. This is the Boothmans in the Yakima Gulch. They've been in the market for about 17. And here's your Tonamakers in Royal City. So those are the concerns that you heard from today from your customers about the 100-mile. And this is the oil vendor that's out of Ritzville. You can go all the way up here to the top if we just did craft vendors. We actually have a craft vendor who's been in the market for about 12 years with his Adirondack chairs, Dale Butler. So I just put this map together with the help of DJ so you could kind of see where our vendors are located. And that's some of your specialty foods like bakery items and such. But this is primarily the produce that we have in our market right now. So with that, did you have any questions?
You answered mine.
Okay.
No, I don't have any questions. I think everything was pretty well clarified that we're not making a change this year to 100. It's been this for the last 2 years.
Right.
And that the vendors that have been in the farmers market, they're outside of the 100-mile radius, are grandfathered in as long as they want to continue on doing it.
Correct.
Absolutely love having them there. If they decide they don't want to do it anymore, then they lose their grandfather status. If they decide then they want to come back a year later, then they can apply for it.
Correct.
And see where that ends up. Now, to say that they haven't participated in a current year doesn't mean that if they miss a couple days, I mean, if they say we're going to be there and they make their yearly application and they pay their fees, then they're in for that year.
Correct. For an example is the Tana makers, they don't come till mid-June.
Right.
So their space is empty all of May and half of June. So that's a good example.
So again, to reiterate, the emails that we got today that made it sound like we were going to disallow some of the current people that are in the market this year would not be substantiated based on
Correct.
practice or policy.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks. Are there any other members of the committee that want to speak to the process of this coming forward? And if you do want to come, then you need to come up here and say your name. So go ahead and come up. Sorry, Joanne.
No, you can't talk from back there, Joanne.
You have to.
In that ground, this is not your first rodeo.
Come up and
You didn't mention the
put
international
your Joanne,
day.
Manita.
Joanne.
I just wanted to remind definitely.
Sorry.
something.
We did take out the International Day, and you saw some of that in your emails. The reason being, we only had one vendor this summer that was reselling craft goods, and we thought if we're tightening up on produce and all these other things that we don't need to have a resale of a craft. So.
Okay, thanks. And Aaron, did you want to add anything more to the?
I just wanted to say thank you for inviting us here and for fielding all the emails that came in the last couple hours and clarifying the policies and, again, doing that here today. We've taken a lot of time and consideration to making these recommendations, and I think Kathleen has explained them fairly well for our intention, so I'm happy to answer any questions that come up today.
Okay, thanks. John?
Not a question, but just a comment. Having read this a couple of times, I think you guys are to be commended for, as a group, the hard work you put in, the time that it must have taken, and there had to be probably some spirited discussion in the process. So, once again, thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Oh, I wanted to add that this past year I was the council liaison to the Farmers Market Commission, and so I watched a lot of this process. I did not attend the last two meetings that were held this year with the policy committee and the commission itself. And the year before that, I was the council liaison to the advisory board that was a predecessor to the commission. So I have seen a lot of discussion and a lot of good, thoughtful process among all the various members and the guests that have come to speak there. Are there any other people in the audience that would like to ask any questions or address?
Can I make one point?
Yes, Kathleen.
On the map, we put the proposed addition of the 5th Street.
Yep.
And if you have any questions regarding why the street department has recommended that we close that at the alley, we initially tried to have a roundabout area and parking in there, and it proved to be unsafe. So we closed that up.
Okay. I'm good.
if there's anybody who would like to, so you can go ahead and come forward and introduce yourself and use this microphone and then address, yeah. And hopefully we can answer your questions.
Yeah, I'm Christine Boothman, and so I'm one of the vendors that is on the map there that's outside the 100-mile area. And so in my thinking and my hopes for when there's changes to the policy, that one of the changes has to do with resale. And since I was one of the resellers, that this is going to affect me. So one of the things that I noticed, which was crafted into the new statement about the resale, is that there are these two items that are going to be allowed still. You're probably familiar with that, Tom, since you're part of that. And that these two items now will only be allowed to be brought from within 100 miles. So not only is it reducing, well, it's not getting rid of resale, first of all, it's just maybe shifting the hands. So the idea that these aren't making these substantial changes is really kind of a misnomer. I think that, so Eric and I have been bringing blueberries Eric's been bringing them for many, many years. I've been bringing them for the last 2 years. And from a farm that otherwise would be exactly what people want. So a small little 8-acre farm, certified organic. And so why the push to make it within 100 miles if that really isn't some sort of a critical thing for you guys, and making the people that are outside the 100 miles really kind of understand that they are second class in the way that the new market policies are. So yeah, you say that these limitations of 100 miles aren't new, but those were created by an advisory board, not the commission, and that advisory board was more hostile in its thinking about what local produce means. And they started out wanting to make a 50-mile, and then they realized that one of their big organic vendors was beyond the 50-mile, so they said, oh, we better make it 100-mile. Then last year we had a big discussion in which it was proposed to make it 150 miles. So this has been being talked about, that this is upsetting to people, that there doesn't no need for this, that the market has had and continue to have and bring in and made customers very happy with people beyond 100. So the 100-mile, even the language of 100 miles is a limiting language. So last year they were at the council meeting talking about making 150, which included everybody but me. So I was not really happy. It said it wouldn't bother, or it wouldn't affect any of their current vendors, which wasn't exactly true. And so they tabled it until we could talk about it again. So there was some really serious talk about, and amongst the people that were making the rules, we're planning about extending that and making all the vendors fit in our framework. The reason for the 200 is twofold. One, so it doesn't include anybody who's already in the market, which mainly would affect us, and also apparently a craft guy who's up north. So there's two of us, not just the Boothmans, but the other thing is that the Moscow Food Co-op regularly buys produce from 200 miles away and has these little signs that says 200-mile local. So 200-mile local is a reasonable definition of local. It's not, and by simply changing that wording from 100 to 200 would take away all the stress that we're feeling and that the customers are feeling. So when, and I don't know exactly what letters you got, but when I heard about it, I told some of my friends, and apparently they told some of their friends who probably don't understand the whole story because they're not, they're just customers. Yeah. But they're happy customers who don't want anything bad to happen. And I think one of the things that the new commission has what they've been given to do is to promote the market, and it's written in the language of the commission, which I left back by the seat, but they're supposed to look out for our interests and for the interests of the people. And so that's why I thought, let's hear from some customers, because that seems to be what's really been lacking.
Well, thanks, Ms. Boothman. I want to have you to respond, or maybe some of the other commission members respond as well. But I do know that you mentioned the 100-mile, where it came from. It is true that the advisory board had the 100-mile in 2011. In 2012 and in 2013, it was the city council that passed the 100-mile piece, and that was brought forward by the city attorney. So
what they did was table any changes.
So anyway, that's where that came. It was introduced within city policy in 2012. So I wanted to see if either of you wanted to address the issue that she raised about the resale piece. There were the two items. I think she's referring to blueberries and asparagus.
You think so, like you're not sure. I've never talked about blueberries and asparagus so much in my life until I joined the commission, but it has definitely been part of our discussion many a times. And the 100 air mile, certainly you and the others are still included in that. We briefly discussed the 150 again, and didn't hear enough or feel that the market needed that change now, knowing that the policies had already been set at 100. The blueberries and asparagus were quickly identified as resale items of high value to our customers, and Kathleen does a great job of speaking behalf on our customers because she fields all of their emails, both positive and negative. Part of the reason is we want to keep those items in our market. We also want them to come from the radius that's been set for all of our vendors, because we felt that it did serve the mission of local and sustainable agriculture. We didn't come with these recommendations sooner because we charged the commission members with showing us that we can find these items in that radius, and so the commission has been charged to find vendors either that are willing to come and bring those for the happy customers so they can still leave with those items that they love, or to hook up producers who do not want to come to the market with vendors who are willing to resale. So we're still keeping those items in the market, but that they're coming from within the radius that's been set for everyone. The policy as it is, or the recommendation as it is written, still has that exception clause to say if the commission can't find the vendors to keep those items at a quantity that's acceptable, that we could still allow others.
John?
Yeah, being a non-farmer, so it sounds to me like we have two issues here.
Yeah, two separate ones.
We've got one issue is the resale. For example, Bill grows it, you buy it, and you sell it. Is that the definition of resale?
That's what resale is. Another person
right.
or vendor sells
and
it.
we, as a farmer's market, we don't particularly like that. Is that true, according to this?
According to this new draft, or according to our present policy?
This one, the new draft.
The new draft is, I'd say, whittling it and putting it so that anybody can bring with the resale with Kathleen's approval, but only if they can find the asparagus and find the blueberries within 100 miles. So there is, in the particular language of the resale, there is no clause that says anything about discretionary decision-making by the director for blueberries or asparagus that are beyond that. So, I've been getting the asparagus, for instance, from the Yakima Nation tribe who grows it, and bringing it here. And so somehow it's supposed to be better if it comes from somebody within 100 miles. That's what I'm at odds with. And with this, we're talking about Northwest and local. So what I'm hoping can happen is that we are also considered within the policy as being local. So, yeah, I'm asking for a simple change from a 1 to a 2 in the 100-mile things. So that really take care of the customers. Still, the resale would have to be approved through the proper channels. And the bringing of any produce would still have to be approved through the proper channels. But it wouldn't make it so that people outside 100 miles are sort of second-class citizens.
Okay, thanks. You can let Erin.
The resale is obviously a contentious issue, and we've looked all over farmers markets to see their manuals and their policies, and it is a mixed bag. Some of them allow a resale, some of them absolutely do not know exceptions, and so it's a decision to make based on the mission of our market, and we decided to approach the resale topic and try and make a transition policy rather than a policy that says no resale, absolutely not, never, ever. We recognize that there's needs in our community that we can't fill if we do that right now. And so we made this policy to be the middle ground, to still allow our consumers to get what they want while supporting local produce. And we felt like this was the best compromise that we could make to fit both of those needs.
And if I may add, if my memory serves, the reason why asparagus and blueberries were identified specifically is that both of them should be able to be grown more locally, closer to Moscow. Both of them are also perennial crops. They take a lot more investment of time and energy and money and so forth by farmers in order to get a crop started. You want to have some idea that there's going to be a market in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and so the intention here is to start building some encouragement within local farmers to start doing that, that investment in the growing of the food. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the plan. That's at least been the discussion that I've heard from the grower representation on our Farmers Market Advisory Commission, or Farmers Market Commission. Now, I know that we have an open spot on our Farmers Market Commission for another farmer. If people are interested, if you're a farmer, if you're interested in being the representative.
We have a craft position open.
We don't have a farmer's position? I thought I heard that from Kathleen that we did.
We have 2 openings, on one which Shirley Green is going to hopefully be reappointed.
Okay.
And then we have another vacant. And it was recommended when the commission was first formalized that we have 2 farmers. And we
have those 2 farmers?
No, we don't. We just have one.
So we do have an open farmer position.
Mm-hmm. No, there's no seat made for an additional farmer position.
There's an extra seat. It's just an at-large seat, but it was recommended.
Well, okay, farmers or non-farmers, please submit your letters of interest to our mayor, Bill Lambert, and he will, I'm sure, entertain those applications.
And if you have a seat or not, you're more than welcome to come to our meetings. I will say that the flurry of emails, although daunting, is encouraging because it means that people are reading the materials and love our market enough to come and say something, and I'd love to see some of these voices and faces at some of our meetings.
And I think you can go ahead and sit down, and if we might invite others.
Not yet.
Well, sorry, Wayne's going to ask you a question first. Sorry.
Let me get back to this resale issue.
Yeah, okay.
You actually reselling the blueberries and asparagus? You buying from them, putting a markup on it, and then reselling them? Is that what you're doing?
Right, exactly.
Would there be any difference in the fact if she acted as an agent and was simply selling them for this other farm as the agent of that farm, and then if you picked up a commission on it, that would be between you and them?
I think that kind of language is specifically talked about. You have to be a person that is an immediate family member to sell something in our market. So that kind of thing is not, even in shared booths, that's not part of the language. It's okay. No, but specifically, there is no language that allows for discretionary choice of allowing my blueberries to come back in next year if this passes. Only blueberries that can be found within 100 miles.
No.
So I mean, the paragraph is very short and very direct.
I think they're going to disagree with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're here to inform me.
Let them work on it.
Amongst each other.
Yeah.
All right, who, you want to have a quick, okay.
No,
Kat-
I was...
Yes.
Kathleen.
So in the, under market policies in the second paragraph, it does say that policies will be enforced by the on-site market manager and/or in consultation with the city's art director, depending on circumstances. Selling your own wares, it just keeps on going. And then there is a mention for, and I need to find the exact spot, but it's that depending on the circumstances. So it's like if there is a discussion and there needs to be a decision made, I can make the decision with the advisory board.
Here it is.
Yep.
Authority to grant an exception.
Yeah.
Got it.
Kathleen?
Yeah,
under
it's
that-
on page 2, number C. It says exceptions if approved in advance by the arts director and/or market manager. Current produce vendors may resell blueberries, asparagus, grown.
Grown within 100 miles.
I think that's the question, is you have the exception on page 1 where you can grant an exception to the 100-mile
Right.
under certain conditions, but that language is not repeated. Do you think that language applies to the exception for reselling?
Because it says there's only one exception.
So maybe that should be reworded.
Is the intent that that same discretion that's granted on page 1 would apply to
Would
the
also
resale?
apply there.
I think
Yeah, that's my question right there, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that language probably ought to be modified slightly to include that, so that
That
there's
just
not a
gives her the
confusion.
discretion to find who she thinks most is appropriate.
Okay.
So, that sounds good. John?
Just a comment. I think that as far as the Moscow Farmers Market, we should all focus on the final consumer. And I know that's what you do. I know that's what you do. And we have to make sure that the person parking their car or strolling down gets what they want when we can supply it at a price they're willing to pay. And the price they're willing to pay oftentimes has to be worked out between the vendor and the purchaser, and as it is in a lot of things. And I know that Kathleen is here to make sure that the final consumer walks away from our farmers market happy, because if they do, we're going to have a bigger and more successful farmers market. If they don't, it will slowly fold in on itself, and I don't think it should, and I don't think anybody in this room thinks it should. So I believe that your concerns, although they're worth noting, I'm not so sure that they are really something to be too concerned about other than to note them. However, I do like your comment about being almost treated like second-class citizens. I'm not so sure that that's what they meant. I don't think it is what they meant, but oftentimes what actually comes out is different than what people meant.
I think the customers are super appreciative that somebody would take the time and the effort on their weekends to bring stuff to the market.
Sure.
And they're voting with their pocketbooks. They're coming, they're buying, they're excited about it. And so to even have ever imposed a 100-mile limit is a philosophic discussion, not a consumer-customer discussion at all.
Others? Okay, it looks like Tom wants to come up and say something.
I'm one of those customers.
Go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Thank you so much. I'm Tom Bitterwolf, with the address and things like that, 1423 Ridgeview Drive, Moscow. And I'm here in response, and I do apologize. I think this morning my note got one thing wrong, which was I thought it was the 100-mile policy that was new, but it's this resale policy, and I apologize. As somebody who comes to the market and has been coming to the market ever since I got to town, this is a major part of our lives. Moscow, this is one of the great things about being in Moscow, being able to go downtown and go and buy fresh produce. I think part of what I am hearing right now is, in fact, a philosophical discussion, because my sense is that the idea of a farmer's market is that you have farmers that bring in produce. The definition of local, I think, is what is troubling me, because the local definition seems, to be perfectly frank, and I said this in my note this morning, capricious and arbitrary. 100 miles. Where the hell does 100 miles come from? Okay, in point of fact, it was a number pulled out of the air. You could, in fact, pull 150 miles or 50 miles or 200 miles out of the air. What's happening right now is that we have a group of vendors who have been here, in some cases since I've been here, for a very, very long time. These people are traveling substantial distances on Saturday morning, early Saturday morning, bringing in produce which is of a sufficiently high quality that some of the local folks aren't selling things because the stuff that's coming from Yakima and elsewhere is better, and the prices are better, and the selection is better. So if the purpose of a 100-mile policy is to protect local growers, then I think it's a false policy. I think if you are correct, John, and say that this should be about the customers want high-quality goods that we know are grown locally, and I regard 200 miles as local, all right, to be brought for fair prices. We also, and this is another very big piece of this, we also, as customers, engage the sellers. This is what's so very different about a grocery store, or even the co-op for that matter. You go into the co-op, you pick your stuff off the shelf, you walk out, you check out, and you're gone. On the other hand, okay, people at the market have become friends over the years. Liz Taylor, for example, Leah, all right, and the Boothmans. These have become friends. We go there to see them, to buy their produce, and to enjoy this wonderful experience in Moscow the Market. I really think that somebody needs to go back and ask the question as to why 100 miles was chosen, because I really do think it was capricious. All right? And to do more than just simply have a yearly granting of an exception here. We have farmers, Eastern Washington. Okay, remember, there's nothing between here and Eastern Washington. All right, there's 100 miles of wilderness between here and there. There aren't any truck farms between here and there. Whereas the Yakima Valley is one of the major growing areas in this region. So even if you wanted to specify, 200 miles in this direction, 150 miles down to Oregon, make it so that you're thinking about the customers, the folks that are there buying these goods who want good quality stuff. And frankly, there's a lot of good quality stuff within a 200-mile radius. I don't see that this is going to hurt anybody by insisting on this. So
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, do you want to reply to me?
Hold on. Kathleen, if you want to...
Just in a little history, when we put together the 100-year, or the 100-mile, sorry, these were the first policies, and they were recommendations from the advisory board, and then they went through legal, and we produced this document. And part of the reason for the 100-mile was to encourage more local growers to participate in the market. And for us to do our job to seek out more people within the 100 miles, to have it be more of a sustainable market with more local investment.
And I think my objection has to do with the definition of local. Okay. And I regard local as not necessarily 50 miles, particularly when you consider the vast expanse of the areas in the West. When I lived back east, 20 miles was local. When I moved west, 300 miles became local. Okay. So it's a different perspective.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, thank you, Aaron.
I also wanted to say that this is something that we discussed. It was brought to our attention to increase that radius again, and I don't think it'll ever completely go off of our agenda for discussion, for the point that local isn't exactly defined. Another reason we did that is we looked at 150 and said, what do we gain? Does it diversify our market? Does it bring things that we don't already have? And we're still looking at that. We want to make the decision to know that by increasing the distance, it's going to benefit our market by adding things that we don't have access to. And so we are still looking at that. We want more, a better understanding of what it will contribute to our market, how that will affect our customers, certainly, and the vendors. So.
I wanted to point out, too, that the commission, the Farmers Market Commission, does have customer representation, there's a variety of people on there, including you.
That's me. I'm not a farmer.
There was another hand over here. Okay, thanks.
Well, they're coming up. Aaron, you mentioned 150 miles as opposed to 200 miles. You can't get Yakima Valley included until you hit the 200-mile radius, correct?
That's correct. I mentioned 150 because that was the name or the number most often thrown around. The number 200 I haven't heard as much anytime on our commission as I have today, to be honest with you. So I think it will go back.
Brought up a good point that between the 100 and the 200, there's really nothing out there until you hit into the Yakima Valley. Mm-hmm. So if the goal is to pick up things that we don't already have, mm-hmm. I think 150 is probably not a number that's really worth discussing. You need to go to that 200 mile if, in fact, you want to bring in more variety and bring in things that we don't have here, and then make the decision, is 200 miles what you want to consider as local?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm Eric Wilson. I'm from the Banner Ranch out of Clarkston. If you don't recognize me, it's because I haven't been here for 10 years. I've been working for the USDA, and they had me in D.C.
I don't know if you're close enough to
I thought I was loud enough.
Yeah, well, it's better.
But prior to that, 20 years ago, I, as myself as a 16-year-old loading up the rig, was running the show on my own for the farm at the farmer's market. At that time, we were the largest vendor. We've come and gone throughout the years, but that's kind of the history. All of the topics that have come up so far today, we've got strong opinions on. I think they're all kind of philosophical in nature and will tie back to whatever the mission of the market happens to be. And the mission of the market can be decided by the market, not necessarily by the vendors. But as far as this policy, before I would discuss any of those, I've got a specific problem with the writing of it, and that is that nowhere in it is the term market vendor defined. One of the complaints that the boothman had when she was up here was talking about how there are two sentences that say immediate family members of the market vendors may assist with sales in the absence of designated market vendor. Immediate families include parents, step-parents, children, and stepchildren of the market vendor. What is a market vendor? I think that the market vendor is Wilson Banner Ranch LLC. It is a business that has members of my family in it. And anybody that is hired by Wilson Banner Ranch LLC is our agent and is our market vendor. They are the vendor. They're employed by us. So the language about the extras in there really goes wide, but yet I hear from my sister that she's really reluctant to ever be gone and has trouble with employees that we've had for 25 years maybe running the market for us. And I thought I would see that answer when I was running through the policy changes, and nowhere does vendor get defined. So how do we deal with relationships to a vendor if the term vendor in of itself doesn't have a definition? And that's kind of changed the topic from everything else, so you can sit on that for a while. And I'll go back to the two things that seem to be the biggest points of contention, and those are resale and what is defined by local. And I'd like to run back to the mission statement, and I'll read it as it is on this policy. To celebrate life on the Palouse by providing the community with the opportunity to buy and sell locally farmed and or created produce and distinctive homemade goods, this venue is meant to encourage and support sustainable economic, social, and environmental practices. So the mission says provide the opportunity to buy locally farmed, but it doesn't define locally farmed in the mission. So having that somewhere down the line, I think if it's going to be an issue, whether it's 100 or 50 or 150 or 200, that's something that's philosophical, and it should be in the mission of the market? Is it to make sure things have some geographic limit, or is it to provide the opportunity to buy what is produced by the grower itself? And that's not in the mission at all, the mission statement. There's nothing in the mission statement that makes any claim as to the producer being the one to sell it as opposed to it being resold. There's nothing in that mission. It says provide, the opportunity to buy an abundant variety. So those two things being an issue, I think they need to be addressed at the mission statement as opposed to within the fine detailed policies belowhand. Our take on that after a 50-mile drive with the family is really a farmer's market, by our definition, is there to provide for the customers only. It is an opportunity for them to purchase from growers without the middleman of a grocery store that doesn't know the product, doesn't know how it was raised. And the grocery store is a limiting factor in that exchange between growers and buyers because they determine who they want to buy from and choose and exclude based on whatever is convenient for them. And they get to kind of dictate what the markup is. They're a middleman in there that's out of the exchange of fair market competition between one vendor and another vendor at a grower's market. How far things come from, I've got no problem setting up next to somebody that's selling oranges from Arizona and is also bringing up something that we do grow in comparison, because I figure whatever they do in travel costs and the fact that they're not best friends, didn't go to school and didn't have their grandmother teach high school locally, is going to favor me anyway. So if I can't compete with them, I probably shouldn't be growing it. And I think that the dollars by our customers will support the vendors that they want to have there, regardless of whether there's a 200-mile limit or not. I'd be in favor of throwing that clear out the window. As far as resale goes, farming has a long history, particularly with perishable goods, of farmers exchanging at the grower cost level, because if you're growing things that can come one year and don't come another year, you've got customers coming to you that expect it every year, regardless of what Mother Nature allows. So we very regularly will trade in years we have one crop that's abundant and another crop that failed. Well, we've got a big pear crop this year, you've got a small peach crop this year. We're not going to talk about dollars. I'll give you this many boxes of pears, you give me that many boxes of peaches. We're going to work stuff out, and they're the same product. I know where it came from, and when a customer comes to me and wants to buy the fruit that came from your farm, I can still have that conversation with them about where it came from, how it was raised, as opposed to the produce manager at a grocery store or the checkout guy at a grocery store. And I think that's why customers come to the market. So, again, on things that are being resold, I really don't care what the committee decides is fair or not. I think if we were going to celebrate life on the Palouse and provide the community with the opportunity to buy and sell what's available, we'd strike that all from there and we'd let resale go. Because if there's got to be a markup to justify it, then whoever is actually producing it has the advantage anyway.
We're going to have to, thank you. Did you want to add any more?
No, that's good enough.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Question for Eric?
Nope.
Okay.
Comment.
All right, we have.
I'm Father Eric.
Okay, your father. Okay, good.
Very short.
If you have, go ahead and come up, and then we're going to have to kind of figure out the closing it up. Yep, thanks.
Often people think that we in the business are willing to be protected. I was at the very first farmers market here and have been over years. I've always maintained that the customer should have the choice. If there is a question of making sure that they know that this product is raised locally and whatever, or the other way around, isn't, signage and information in the booth can take care of all of that. If it's blueberries from Seattle or wherever, if they want to advertise it that way, the customer then has the ability to make the choice. And when we as a market, starts trying to protect people, we get into that's the beauty of it, is that we got the two getting together without either the grocery store or the market people getting in the middle of it.
Thank you. Father Eric. Wayne.
That made a lot of sense. Eric, you did too. It seems like we're trying to protect the consumer from what the consumer can't protect themselves from, and I think they're very good at they're smart buyers. This farmers market policies seems to now be a never-ending process. We're trying to. Are we looking for problems to solve? Are we solving problems that are not there? What I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about is that are we going to eventually get to where we're regulating the farmers market to the point that it strangles? You know, are we making this too complicated? And I think we might be getting to that point. I mean, folks, we're talking blueberries and asparagus here. And it's just we're trying to figure out, well, we're going to buy it within 100 miles or 200 miles. And that's my point, Kathleen, is are we over-regulating the farmer's market to the point where it's going to strangle?
Let's get one more comment, and then we're going to, I think we had some specific things that we might be able to address. And I just wanted to recap some of those pieces.
My name is Travis Heath. I'm a craft vendor here, or my wife is actually the craft vendor. But the question I have is, if you guys are going to open this up for resale for the produce people, what does that affect with everybody else that actually makes the homemade crafts, their homemade cookies, their homemade cakes? If they're going to open this up for the produce people, how are they going to regulate that for the crafters and the other people that's there? Are they going to put a special deal there for the produce vendors? Or are they going to, like the gentleman said over there, make everybody else second-rate citizens about the questions? You know, I mean, that's something you guys are going to have to work out there too. There's more than just produce vendors here. There's many vendors there. And so that was just the question that I had.
Thanks. Did you want to address any of that? I don't.
No.
I'm not saying you have to. I'm just asking if you want. Okay.
I
Thanks.
just have one. I just wanted to clarify. Is the desire that craft vendors would like to resale, or the lack of protection from resale?
I wouldn't like to resell, no.
Okay.
I mean, by no means. Resell is, unless what it creates is a lot more animosity and what do you call it? Competition between other people.
Yeah, I just
wanted to. You don't
to
have that big of a profit margin when you're out there anyway.
Yeah.
So if you turn out that you're going to put in there resell, somebody brings stuff made, Asia, China, whatever, and sells it for the same price that you're out there putting your heart and soul into this stuff, then they could cut your price down to nothing, and then you wouldn't be able to make it in the market, but somebody from 200 miles out, whatever, can or from even locally can come in and sell junk and then make your products look. That's just like selling rotten apples next door to somebody that sells good apples.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And theoretically, that's possible with produce as well. Bill, would you, it sounded like it looked like you were making some notes about some of the specific suggestions. I think there was one on the resale piece where it would give Kathleen the same authority to make a decision on the 100-plus question.
Correct.
I think there was also a question about the date in the name of the policies that I heard from Rod.
Correct.
And I think there was also a day of the week in replacement for the date given. Those were the specific pieces that I heard outside of the radius question. And what I think we should do is, it seems like perhaps we could, I mean, I know that we need to get some kind of policy out so that we can inform people soon.
Correct.
If we can get these written to include these pieces, these 3 or 4 pieces that we just listed, for the next council meeting, I think we can take over the conversation at that point and have a rejuvenated or, freshened up
Revised
piece
version.
with those 3 pieces.
Okay.
With the dates. The other one was the definition of a market vendor. I think we needed some clarification on that, and maybe that's why Rod's walking up here right now. And that's, okay.
Well, on the first page, under market policies, talking about market vendors, it says that it basically defines what a market vendor is, saying that they're expected to be selling their own wares and to be in attendance at the market.
Sure.
So it is the producer or his family member.
Okay. I think the question is, can a market vendor does it have to be an individual human being, or can it be an LLC? Was the question I think that was raised.
Well,
and that might be answered by Citizens United, I don't know, but I'm trying to figure out if this is can an LLC be the market vendor? If so, does an LLC have brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, and so, you know what I mean?
I think what they're trying to say is that it's the individual who grows it, and they could be an LLC because for tax purposes or estate planning, they may have established that as even as a corporation, but it could still be a very small family farm.
Okay.
So could an employee of an LLC sell the produce at the market?
Currently not.
Not under this policy.
Under this policy.
Currently, we need to have a representative from the grower's family that's actually in the market and there. A lot of other markets operate on marketer, where somebody picks up a produce truck and goes to a market. This market has stood the test of time for having the grower in the market, which is why you see Cole Townemaker in the Moscow market on Saturdays when his family is actually in 18 markets.
So in the case of an LLC, it'd have to be a registered member of the LLC?
Well, that'd be the family member or the person who's actually doing it.
I got to ask for clarification here. So you don't care
So wait a minute. In order to ask clarification, you do have to come up to the mic. So, yeah. Sorry.
So in that
So
case,
wait till you get up here.
This one?
Either one.
Eric, all this has to be recorded, so that's why it has to be kept.
Yeah, I'll speak into the mic so the room doesn't have to hear me, but as long as it gets recorded. So my dad's 72. Prior to the LLC, this would have been a sole proprietorship. Raising peaches and climbing up and down ladders and pruning is a really difficult thing for a 72-year-old with shoulder problems to do. So it would be perfectly okay for his son or daughter or wife or sister or whatever the rules are in there, or other members of the LLC, but say our employee who does all the pruning on the tree, who picked 80% of the crop, who is involved with the decisions and management for that crop, is somehow not a valid person to represent that commodity at the market for consumers, but my sister, who lives in southern Idaho and is only on the farm for 2 days a year, would be, seems like there's some misunderstanding to come from that.
Thanks, Eric. I get the question. So I guess what I'm wondering is, Rod, could you come back up for a quick second? We only have 4 more minutes, so I'm going to close this up almost right away.
That's a huge policy change.
That has nothing to do with the recommendations that we've set forth. That's
Okay.
a whole other policy change.
Okay. So I think this is an important thing for us to think about, and we need to figure this out. Whether we can get this in the next week in these policies, I'm not sure, but I think it's something that we need to explore. The other pieces, I think we can get drafted up for the version that goes to the council, but I would really like to see us get to this question, because it makes a lot of sense. If somebody's going running up and down the ladder all the time, they might know something about the fruit that they're picking and would do a good job of representing it on the farm. So I think we need to.
I mean, that's a policy, that's a philosophical issue.
Right. Well, and all of this is policy, so.
I mean, it's a philosophical issue about, do you open it up to a big corporation? I mean, where would it stop?
Right. Okay. So, do we have a
Tom, I don't want to see this type of a conversation vetted out at council. It'll take the whole night. And that's why we have the Farmers Market Commission.
Well, right.
And they sit on this. And they've done an exemplary job on something that's really, really complicated. I don't want to complicate this any deeper than what it is right now. There are some clarifications that we need to do. And I do think maybe that 100-mile thing might need to be looked at a little bit deeper.
Well, I just might recommend then maybe have direction from this committee back to the commission to talk about the 100 miles and the vendors issue.
Well,
I don't think it would be necessary for what we're going to do with this policy.
Sure, that's fine. What I would like to see is that we move this to council with these specific changes that we've talked about here. Leave the 100 miles alone and move it forward. I think that.
I'm sorry, can I clarify, the 100 miles or?
Leave it as you've got it stated here.
Okay.
With the changes that give Kathleen discretion for this year. And
with
then
the resale items.
With the resale items and all of these pieces. So leave it as it's written here with those discretionary changes to get the policy moving forward for this particular year. I think that it allows all the people that were in the market last year to continue to function this year.
Okay.
It gives the arts director a chance to make any other discretionary changes that might come about, and allows us to get this thing moving forward so that we can mail things out to farmers and get the market going for this year.
And then the council can also provide direction or request to the commission to explore the 200
and then I
miles
think we can
and the
move
additional
that,
issues
right, the
for
council
the.
can be asked on that piece too.
And also, I think the definition of vendor.
Market vendor.
Market vendor.
Yeah, farmer.
I really.
But that would be something else that.
The commission works on.
Yep.
I would like to see the commission work on both the 100 versus 200. I mean, long-term, figure it out this year, the 100, 200 question, the LLC question. I think both of those would be good things to try to figure out.
And we began discussing both of those, both the 100 and the marketing, or the market vendor. We've talked about the language of an intern or something. We just didn't feel like we had enough support to change the existing policy this season to make that decision right now. So it's something for the next go-round at this point, but we can certainly try bring it up sooner to see what we can do for this year.
Sound good?
Well,
yeah.
I'd anticipate that discussion, the 200 and the LLC, would be possibly for policies for the following year.
That would be my recommendation.
That these would be in place for the upcoming.
Who knows? The council will say whatever they want, but that would be my recommendation for making it move forward. I mean, really, all of this, we're going to always look at policies with the farmers market because it's a transitional thing. I mean, it really does take time. It's the first year that we've got a farmers market commission as a full commission, I think they did a terrific job in this first year.
They did a wonderful job.
And I think that we need to continue to support that process. If we subvert it right now, then I think that it's going to, backfire on us.
You're right, and that was my concern. I was getting a little concerned at some of the things you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You almost were subverting what the commission was doing.
No, I'm just...
By telling them what to do.
No.
I
What I was trying to do is to make sure that the specific pieces that came up here were incorporated with language changes, and that we give them some direction for, future policy things. That's what I'd like to see happen.
Okay.
If that's what we got, then we can adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you.